There are several reasons you want to get your 40-man roster right. You're going to want to take advantage of trades. You're going to want to be able to have that next upcoming player when it comes to injury or performance, and even in the offseason. You are listening to the Franchise Ain't Dead podcast. There are several times in the MLB The Show franchise year that you're going to want to get this right. Number one, starting before you even start on the roster control screen. By default, every roster here has its pretty much own set 40-man roster. They all look relatively the same with some exceptions. Every team is going to start with 5 starters at the MLB level. As far as how many are on the 40-man roster, it really can range anywhere from 7 starters all the way up to 12 on a handful of teams. On average, there are 7. I'd go with maybe 8, and I'll tell you why a bit later. When it comes to relievers, every team will have at least 7. Now, it'd be 8 if you include the closer, because I particularly consider the closer a form of reliever, but not a specific position different. But whatever, that's semantics, nobody really cares. Teams usually run anywhere between 8 and 13 on the 40-man roster. Again, this is before you jump in. I would basically only pay attention to your team only and not really concern yourself with the CPU teams outside of yours. Unless you're in franchise, then I would be concerned about it a bit more. Teams usually run with a closer and might have 2. Some teams might have 3 on their 40-man. When it comes to catcher, most teams have 2. Actually, pretty much every team in Major League Baseball is going to have 2. Some might have 3, some might have 4. For instance, the Seattle Mariners on this roster have 3 Kyle Riley, Mitch Garver, and Sebi Zavala. Mind you, this is the most recent live roster as of, what day is it? The 22nd of April. That could have changed from opening night. That could have changed from early access night. That could change in 5 months at the end of the regular season. Then from there, every position usually gets covered with at least 1 player. Some teams are going to run with 2 because one guy might be a DH. Guy might play another position. Whatever the situation may be. A breakdown of the 40-man roster usually looks like this for me. I've been playing MLB The Show for every year it's been out, and even played it back when it was, what was it called? And whatever year it was series. Usually I go like this. 8 starters, 11 or 12 relievers, a closer if you feel like it. Most teams are gonna have a closer. It's kind of debatable. I usually run with 3 catchers on the 40-man roster. As far as first base is concerned, I usually only have 1 up, unless it really makes some sense to have a second one. Say your first baseman isn't that good, and you just want to have a backup just in case. Usually on the Major League roster, somebody else can play first base, whether it be a third baseman or whether it be a catcher. So I wouldn't worry too much about first. As far as second base is concerned, I'd have 2, maybe 3. Again, play it by your team and how they are at that time of the year. Third base, you have 2. Shortstop, usually have 2 on the 40-man roster. This is not a team I'm running with. This is just a showcase. The outfield situation, though, I'd have at least 6, if not 7, maybe 8. That leaves you with anywhere between 34 and 38 guys on the 40-man roster. Again, that way you have that fluidity that you might need to make a move. More on that in a minute. If you've set your 40-man roster before you jump in the franchise and you see this screen, you should be good to go. You can jump right into spring training, and then once it's over with, you set your 40-man roster how you need to. It is the end of spring training. Adley Rutschman has 3 options remaining. In other words, he can be sent down 3 times within the span of his career. Fun fact, MLB The Show almost never gets this right. Some guys will say they have no options remaining. In other words, that number will say 3 of 3. Other teams will have it where they'll have 0 out of 3. You can send guys down whenever you want to. That's really kind of minutia for some of this, as you can't really change it when you're outside of franchise. You can't even change it inside of franchise. See how many options a guy should have as opposed to what they do have in real life. If you find a roster where it's right, by all means, download it, do what you gotta do. Do be careful of these 3 of 3s. You may end up in a situation where you're kind of hemming and hawing and trying to figure out who you want on your major league roster as opposed to down to the minors at the end of spring training. And if you choose somebody who has more options remaining as opposed to a guy like Jorge Mateo who has none left, here is the dreaded list of players who ended up getting released because, or might be released as they're on optional assignment waivers, and teams can claim them if they have space on their 40-man roster. It usually is a litany in a later season, 2025, 2026. This is 2024. There's maybe 12 players here. There can be upwards of like 60, 70 players on there, and if you leave your 40-man roster below the 40-man cutoff, in other words, if you are under full, like my gas tank, you can add one of these guys to your major league squad. You can also add them to the squad and then attempt to send them down anyway. That's a little riskier, though. The CPU they don't really snatch guys up off the waiver wires too often. Once you've sent them, or once we get to this point in the season, it happens occasionally. It's not a guarantee, but do be careful before you designate a guy for assignment. Damn, Cole, you got waived. Sorry to hear it. Now, please ignore the ridiculousness of this trade. The Orioles wouldn't do this. The Red Sox probably wouldn't do this. Cade Bovich is not on the Orioles 40-man roster. Hypothetically speaking, I'm offering a trade to the Red Sox for Trevor Story, who is on the 40-man roster, and Brennan Bernardino, who is also on the Red Sox 40-man roster. This trade will go through, but I'll run into a huge issue. Cole Irvin, as I stated earlier, claimed off of waivers to the White Sox. Damn. I have too many players on the 40-man roster. Now, you can hit auto to fix the 40-man roster, and you are at the whim of the CPU figuring out who should be sent down. I personally don't auto anything unless it's maybe an auto utilize of a player that is injured. As stated earlier, the CPU rosters will have way too many pitchers. This Orioles roster right before opening day has 23. Which brings me to an important point. What are your injury sliders? A lot of people just run their franchise on just straight default. They don't change much. But if you're like me and you've played this game a long time, even if you haven't, you want the best experience that you are playing, you usually adjust these things. This is literally just a slider set I've introduced myself as just a means to, when I'm playing, the game plays just a bit different. Injuries. I am what you might call a masochist, and again, I've played this game long enough to know injuries probably aren't going to happen unless you set this thing beyond 5. Gameplay at 10, because in-game, players are just not going to get injured. I am running a offline franchise where the simulator injury frequency is at 10 because, well, I don't feel like there are enough injuries from the AI teams, and I want them to have to utilize their entire 93-man roster. Again, your 40-man roster is important for the next man up. If somebody gets hurt, for instance, on a franchise I'm running on this channel, Mike Trout is going to be out till late July. He's out 2 to 3 months, now 1 to 2 as time has already passed with a fractured shin. I had to call somebody up on the 40-man roster, and if you watched any of the episodes, you would know who that player was. Mind you, we are in year 2, 2025, and as you can see, we got a lot of injuries in center field. Jordan Adams, who actually got hurt before Trout did, I would have loved to have called him up. He wasn't available. Bryce Teodosio, also not available, was hurt before Trout as well. So instead of making a trade, because I don't make a ton of trades in any of my franchises, I decided to call up Deshaun Knowles, who, he's been okay. He's been all right. He's made some plays here and there. Not much in the way of power, to be honest. Probably one of Adams or Bryce come back and definitely once Mike Trout gets back, he'll get sent back down to the minors. But I need somebody to fill the role. Actually, I couldn't sign anybody. I have 93 guys on the roster. So I was shit out of luck. And because I was SOL, I like to think of the 40-man roster as a means of easy call-up of any players that are either major league-ish, major league kind of ready, or near MLB talent. In the upper right-hand corner, you see how many players I have at each level on the 40-man roster. I am running with 36 on this in this franchise in 2025. Some of that because, well, guys are injured, and I didn't feel the need to replace guys that I know are 40-man worthy and really major league worthy with players that, honestly, I'm probably not going to call up this season. Chad Wallach in season 1 did see some burn in 2023 when Logan O'Hoppe got injured. Adam Simber, he is basically major league ready. Ignore the overall. He's got solid enough per nines where if I get an injury to a reliever, I'm going to end up calling him up. Same goes for Ben Joyce. If you've watched the Angels franchise I have on State of the Franchise Gaming, I probably mentioned I do want him to eventually become the closer for the Angels team going forward. Victor Medeiros is at the AAA level, and to be honest, he's not this close from a call-up. Don't know when it'll happen. It is probably going to take at least 2 injuries before that is the case, as to be real with you, I am looking at guys like Chase Chaney getting a call-up. I know he's in AA, but his per nines are okay enough, and I pitched with him in some in the minors. A game here or there. I like his stuff. 2051. We are significantly far in the future, and with good reason. I've got to show you how to play the 40-man roster to your advantage in the offseason. Now, none of these players are real players. None of them have been in the minors. We are that far ahead in the future, but the point still remains. So don't criticize the moves I'm making. Let's be honest. You ain't never going to play this anyway. This Mets roster runs into a couple of issues, one of which you see on my left, the other you're going to see on the right. There's 96 guys on the roster. This guy is at 80, but he is 23 years old. Maybe somebody's a free agent, and he's also not on the 40-man roster. Maybe he will get the call-up after, let's be honest, a renewal contract, which ain't going to cost much. Anytime between, well, exclusive rights free agency, the true starter free agency, and typically the 20th of November is when you have the opportunity to set your 40-man roster. I wish the selection for the 40-man roster screen were better, and it basically showcased anybody that's eligible for it. Please ignore my oldest cat. Her name is Zena. Otherwise, till the day we get a better screen for it, let's be real, you kind of got to sort through everybody and see who is on the 40-man roster, who is not. I usually go by position by position, to see anybody that I might want to add that can get snatched up in the Rule 5. A couple of combinations come into play. I'm just going to read this off to you. The Rule 5 draft is held in December after winter meetings, not at the winter meetings. And by November 20th, every team has to have their 40-man roster set. If a team wants to add free agents to its 40-man roster, you do have to have space for them on there. Otherwise, by the November 20th deadline, you will have to designate someone for assignment, waive them, trade them, whatever you have to do in order to make sure that you are at or under 40, or else once you get to the Rule 5 draft, if you have 40, you are unable to select anybody, though you can still lose players. After 4 or 5 years as a professional, and when they say professional, they don't mean at the major league level, they mean after they are drafted. So if you draft a 18-year-old player, they are usually eligible by age 23. If they're 19, they're also by age 23, but still 4 years. Dave Nichols would be one of those players that is eligible for the Rule 5 draft, and obviously he's not on the 40-man roster, and honestly, you can get away with putting him on the 40-man roster, as he does have plenty of minor league options left. So if you have to move him down, you can do it without issue. Out of these 5 players, I can tell you right now, those highest 3 overalls would get snatched up in a heartbeat. So this Mets team actually has 20 guys in their 40-man roster. Do what is smart and put them on the 40-man roster, even if you're not going to play them and you have injuries off. You never know. I would advise you not to call guys up to the 40-man roster if you don't have to. He's not eligible, don't bother. At least not before the Rule 5 draft. Afterwards, you can do what you need to. What I typically do is look for guys who do have eligible for the Rule 5 draft, and if I feel like they might get a call up or might get snatched up in the Rule 5 draft, I'll put them on. Adrian Garcia, older player, 30 years old. I'm not too concerned with losing him. Even if he's an okay pitcher, we can replace him with somebody else. Clearly, he's not good enough for the majors, being as he's a 68 overall. He's got 37 days of service time. Like, we're not going to lose much by letting him be exposed. We are right before the Rule 5 draft. This Mets team has 24 players on its 40-man roster. Now, when you do draft players in the Rule 5 draft, you do have to keep them on your Major League roster. There were 16 players on the Mets MLB roster, meaning we can draft a number of players to pull them up to the majors. This man is making $41.8 million. I wouldn't sign him for nothing. I wouldn't draft him for nothing. I would have cut him. Once your 40-man is full, whether it's before the Rule 5 draft or during the Rule 5 draft, the draft continues going on until teams decide not to anymore. Once you skip a selection, you cannot draft at any other point in time in this. And as you can see, the draft is going to continue going. The Padres took a player, and it ends with the Padres as no one else selected anybody since then. Very important, players do have to stay on your 26-man roster, or if you attempt to send them down, if you do send them down, as in you were to go right into the roster screen, and I don't have any Rule 5 draft picks, but take for instance Steve Carver here. If I were to send him down, press X or A to move to AAA, Double, or even Class A, they will end up being released to be sent back to their original team. So say Steve Carver played for, I don't know, the Marlins, and we, Rule 5, picked him, and we decided we don't want him no more. At any point in time, he ends up going back to his original team, and the original team has to figure out whether they want him or not.
You are, it seems, a man of many skills. A rare combination.